the one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up? Welcome to episode 271 of the Sports Card Nation podcast. Battling a little bit of flu-like symptoms, but I'm okay, doing all right. Got a John Squared episode today. Two Johns on one show. Myself and Mr. John Mangini. Incredible collection. Just was featured on the Card Life show. I've known him a little bit, and frankly, I should have had him on a lot sooner than today. But better late than never, and great ambassador, advocate, and a good guy who cares about the hobby, and going to pick his brain and chop up a little bit of hobby today with him. So with that being said, let's get this show underway.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.
All right, real excited to have the next gentleman on the Sports Card Shop guest line. First time on, that is my bad. Should have had him on much sooner. I apologize to him off the air. I apologize to him on the air. I call him the best dressed man in the hobby, but most people probably call him Mr. John Mangini. Welcome to the show.
Hey, so excited to be on.
All right, listen, I know it's sort of the standard first time on question, but like me, you've been in the hobby a long time. I guess we could say we're lifers, but I'm sure many know, but for those listening to the show, maybe who don't know, kind of where it all began, how and when it all began for you. What got you in the hobby?
Yeah, so when I was little, I was truly a baseball card and baseball fan as long as I can remember. My mom claims that she started buying me cards when I was 2 years old and that I was fascinated with them. The first ones I remember buying I was 5 years old. Still remember opening that first pack at a little store. It was before you had things like Sheetz and 7-Eleven. You would have an actual family-owned little store. And I remember that. And as I grew up, got a little older, I used to walk to a flea market through the woods. I grew up in the country. And the flea market was open on Sundays, and my friends and I would go down there, and I could buy the old vintage cards. And so I was fascinated with that because when I first started buying cards, I had a babysitter, and she brought me over a box of cards, and they were a few years before the ones I had. And I was just fascinated with them. And I read a lot of baseball books when I was a little kid. So I knew all the great players. And so when I would go to the flea market, I was seeking out, the players that my dad talked about and the ones I read about. And so I'm buying up, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Clemente I'm seeking out, and my friends are buying Steve Garvey and the modern players of that day. And I ended up with a very large vintage collection, before I was even in high school.
Yeah, everyone else listening to that, John, is like, my babysitter just spoke on the phone to her boyfriend the whole time. They didn't bring me no cards. They're like, you got the right babysitter. But yeah, man, it's here in like the corner store back when, like you said, when we had those, and for me growing up in New York City, and they still have those, but it's not the same, right? Like it used to be.
I'll tell you, we used to scrounge up whatever change we could get. And, packs were like 25 cents back then. And we would walk that. It was even farther to the store, a little bit farther in our little town. And they had a newsstand, and we would go and buy packs like every day in the summer. I swear we would walk there every day. So I put together like all those sets from when I was a kid because I just had, I bought so many packs.
Do you still do set? Like I was a set guy years ago, and then as my space sort of got more limited, and I had to be more economical. I've gotten away from doing complete sets. Is that something you still you do? Or has your mindset changed at all with a set?
I think for most of us, our mindsets have changed. I used to seek those sets out, have lots of binders still, and I have near sets from the early 1900s on. I still slowly work on them all. I work on the 33 Tattoo Orbit, DeLong, all those sets, E sets. I work on so many sets. But I think for all of us, it has changed. The hobby has changed where we're more individual cards now. And, I think that started to change with the modern cards when they started putting the autograph inserts, the memorabilia inserts, all the different parallels. And it's just impossible to put the whole set together. So you can work on the base set, but those just aren't as fun as they used to be, right? And so I tend to not even buy a lot of boxes or packs. I just bought a Stadium Club box, a hobby box. That's a first box I bought in a very long time. I tend to just go for the individual cards that I want out of the sets now, mostly.
And you make a great point too. A master set, if air quotes, in 1975 was a lot easier, and it wasn't easy even then, but it's a lot easier than, like you said, some of these modern day with all the colored parallels, the 1-of-1s, printing plates, and things like that. So,
it's we had a different kind of chase back then. Sometimes there were variations or errors, and you want to get all of those. Like in the early Fleer cards, for instance, they had a ton of errors, and you have like
I think there was more errors. I think there was more errors than regular cards in that early
maybe,
Fleer.
But I have all those. The reverse negatives. That in 1979 you had the Bump Wills error card, which we were all just fascinated with, showing him on a Blue Jays. On the Blue Jays, he was clearly in a Texas Rangers uniform, and even in like 1989, like I put that set together. So the 89 Upper Deck, I'm sorry, and you have there's a Jose Canseco variation, there's a Gary Sheffield variation, there's 2 promo cards in there, and so I'm a bit of a completist, but I can complete that, right? I don't have to chase these 1-of-1s or 1s of 25, and there's 100 different of them to go chase. It might be fun to do that, but it's near impossible, and it sure would be expensive. Not like the old days.
Yeah, you mentioned Stadium Club. Like you, John, I don't open a ton of the newer stuff anymore. I'm heavily slanted vintage, but Stadium Club, I think you'll agree with me. Maybe that's why you did buy a box, like you said, when you typically don't. The photography in that is just amazing, right? And
phenomenal. Yeah.
And I say, when I see it, and I love it, obviously, and like you just said, I'm like, they need to do more of that rather than just have Stadium Club sort of be known for that, which isn't terrible, but they need to do maybe more of that across the board. I know you probably remember, they went away from it, but remember even Studio with the up close portraits, you got to see these guys really up close a lot of times in sort of out of uniform, kind of in a photo studio setting. I'd like to see some of that brought back. Obviously Topps does a Heritage every year, which is paying homage to sets of the past. I know Studio's not their brand, but they can do their own version of it, obviously call it something else. But some of that stuff from us growing up, like I know it's dated, but there's something there. Like, you know what I mean? That's why we're still in this hobby, 40, 50 years later. Some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to be honest. I don't really like the Studio because
okay,
I joke around. The Mariano Rivera rookie card. He's like in street clothes. It looks like a picture he took for his prom that he sent to his girlfriend or something. And I always joke around. I'm like, I collect ball players. I don't want to date these guys like that. I don't need a portrait in street clothes for me. I like the action because I'm collecting
Yeah.
baseball players. You know what I mean? And that's how I view some of the players that maybe weren't the best people, or things
Mhm.
along those lines. Is that I collect these? I collect the history of the game, and they
Yeah.
played, and I have to view them like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't collect anything, right? It's like I always say about the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's not the good guy Hall of Fame. There might
Yep.
only be 12 people in it if it was. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
the Sport Hall of Fame and what they did
Yeah.
in the sport. And
Yeah.
I just
You
have
gotta-
to, view it that way, really.
Yeah, you compartmentalize that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'm collecting the ball player, not the person, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
At
and
least in my mind.
yeah, and I get that. And my take on that too, John, is I don't want a lot of like that kind of stuff, but every once in a while, just something different where you kind of let their hair down, so to speak, and you see maybe the other side of, off the field type of stuff. But like you said, it's not everyone's bag, and I get that. And that was the good thing about having a product that was all that, because if you didn't like it, you didn't have to buy it. It wasn't like
That's
mixed
right.
in. It wasn't mixed in with everything else. And like, hey, I don't really.
Hey,
I'm not
Target's
fond of
filled
this
with
stuff.
boxes of stuff nobody wants to buy.
Yeah, sorry,
the hobby. Has
sorry,
moved
Topps
all-
Gallery.
The hobby has moved to all to the lottery ticket products, right? So you want to rip those things where you could pull that $60,000 card, and many people just throw the rest away. They want nothing to do with the base cards. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that's kind of what it's moved to for new product. Now, there are some of us purists that like to put a set together every now and again. Like every once in a while, there is a set that kind of speaks to me, and I'll work on it, and it's fun. It's fun to put it together, like maybe an archive set or a heritage set. And I don't complete many of those, but I try to get like all the stars and as many of the inserts as I can. That's fun. Like that one year they had Will Ferrell on the cards at different ballparks and chasing down all of his cards. I'm not Keith Olbermann. I'm not out there paying for every autograph card, but just having the base card was fun, a fun little chase. So I do that, and I did end up with a lot of complete sets because I joined the Topps Montgomery Club a number of years ago, and I always get back in. It just renewed now, so they always send me a complete set at the end of the year with the Montgomery Club stamp, which is nice. But I kind of forget I have them because I just kind of store them away.
Yeah. I think it's funny with those Montgomery. I was a member for like 4 or 5 years, and I stopped. But they only produced those sets to the amount of memberships, and memberships is at least at one time were limited. I think that's going to be a set years later, John. That I think people are sleeping on it now. But I think years later, when people try to do like the run of them, and they realize how little of them probably exist comparatively speaking to a lot of other modern day stuff, I think it'll see an appreciation more later on than we're seeing even today.
You're probably right, because you go back and some of the cards that weren't really popular at the time or anybody thought much of are now selling for way more and are in way more demand years later. People realize that about them. And, when I'm looking around or shopping for cards or at shows or the National or whatever, I never see anybody selling a Montgomery rookie card ever. I can't remember ever seeing one. So I don't know if people are keeping them in those boxes and they're not cracking them out. But I honestly have never seen one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people are keeping those factory sets sealed. They got the cellophane wrapping on them. I don't think a lot of people are opening them. So I think what, somebody's going to like, hey, I didn't join the club that year. Or that's when I stopped joining the club. I got to get all these other sets.
Yeah, that happens too. Yeah.
After I stopped, and there's just not a million of them. Like a lot of other things, there's a million of them. And I think that's when people own those sets. I obviously have 4 or 5 over yonder there too. I think that's when those things kind of get their just desserts and just due. Right now they're not, but I think there's going to come a time when people realize how it's a non-overproduced set during the overproduced era. And
Yeah, I don't
that's,
know how
you
many sets exist, John, but Otani, you would think that card would be really hot right now. But I suspect the reason that you don't see them is I think it's mostly like real collectors that don't sell
Yeah.
their stuff that buy those memberships. I suspect because I just love getting the various sets throughout the year. And you'll get an autograph card here, you'll get a special set, and there's a lot of rookies. They always put the hottest rookies in there. But
Yeah.
I never see them sold on the secondary market, very rarely. And so what that tells me is it's probably collectors that don't sell that get them that join and get them in their possession and they just stay there. And that's what you see with a lot of the old vintage rare cards from the early 1900s, 1800s is when those cards go into a collector's possession, you don't see them again because they're not selling them. So you have pretty much wait till somebody dies and leaves it to their family to see those things again, or until they're in retirement maybe and just are done with it and want the money, for their retirement home or something like that. Because a lot of them just go into obscurity.
Yeah, I'll use you might get this commercial. Remember the Roach Motels, right? They go in, but they don't come out, right?
Yeah, right.
When those cards, like you said, you said it perfect. They get it. Those are required for in a collection, and they're not for resale, and they don't ever become available again until the next owner, maybe with a death or it's bequeathed to them. It's not available until that person takes possession of it. Maybe they appreciate it less and see a few dollar signs and say, "Hey, I'm gonna cash this in," so to speak. So, and it's someone who buys vintage for personal collection. It's someone who buys vintage. I'm a show dealer as well to have a show inventory. It seems like every year, John, it's harder to really replenish that. I get
I believe
plenty
it.
of offers. I get plenty of new stuff when that box gets open, but it's a lot of vintage I don't see as much as I like to, and it's getting tougher. And
I think you see less
sense.
and less of it. And there's only there's only a few shows where you could go and find a lot of vintage.
Yeah, Strongsville, which I've never been to as of yet. I know my friend Danny Black pretty much goes every year. Every year he tries to, talk me off the ledge. You got to go. It's not for lack of want. One of the problems for me is I can only do so much travel. I'm a teaching assistant. It's during the regular school year. It's difficult to take time off. And the Strongsville show is very close to the national, at least one of them.
Yes.
And so it's like this year with the national being in Cleveland, it's like I'll be if you do both of those shows, and a lot of people will do it. But for me, coming from New York, it is like doing the same trip, just a couple weeks apart. I just can't pull it off. So, but one of these days, I always joke with Danny, like, "Hey, come by and pick me up, and I'll go. I just don't want to drive. Yes, I'm not gonna be a cheapskate." But I got to get to, because everyone that's been to that show usually raves about it. And, it's not like you said, it's nice to go to a show where if you're of the vintage variety and that's what you collect, that shows right up in your wheelhouse.
It's so much fun to go to a show and, those tables, even at the National, there's just certain tables that just jump out at me. Like I'm just drawn to like a magnet.
Yeah, no doubt. Speaking of National, I want to talk about another thing that just happened recently too, but we'll segue since you brought it up. How many have you been to at this point?
Well, believe it or not, I just went to my first one 2 years ago. So I've gone 2 years in a row now. So the Atlantic City one 2 years ago was the first one I ever went to. I was always afraid to go, John, because, it's like going to a casino with $10. I just so afraid because I knew I would see so much that I want to buy and run out of money the first half hour. And, but it wasn't like that at all. And I always heard, like, when you go to the National, you can get any cards you want, like whatever you want. That's not true.
Yeah.
That is not true at all. There were so many cards that, I look for because I like to collect the really obscure, rare stuff that I didn't see at all. But last year at the National, I blew a lot of my wad the first night, like in the pre-opening, because I stumbled on an Allen and Ginter, Tim Keefe, you know, and I couldn't pass it up. It was a nicely graded one.
Yeah.
And that happened.
Well, don't feel bad. Listen, for as long as I've been in the hobby, I've only been, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them myself. For many years, in my younger hobby days, even my store years, I had a store for 6, 7 years. You know, the National, what we know it as today, John, it was not like that always. So, you know, years ago, it was just a big giant card show, and I was doing plenty of shows. You know, being in New York, I was doing plenty of shows around the area, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, it's just a big giant show. I can't justify the expenses to get there between travel and hotel. And so I didn't go. You know, people were like, hey, you're going to go? And I'm like, it's cool. I don't have a problem with anyone going, but for me, I just can't justify, you know, the cost ratio. But it's a different event now. It's a whole, you know, I know it's always been the National, but it's changed into a completely different event. Obviously, it's still a card show with a tremendous amount of cards and a lot, like you said, obscure ones that with the Keefe but you got so many other things, right? The hobbies became more of a community now than it was even 20, 30 years ago. So the event. There's events outside the event, right? People get together, have dinner, go to a game, have a trade night, whatever it is. I'm leaving stuff up, but it's become an event besides the show. When I think at one, you know, for many years it was just the biggest card show of the year. Now it's still that, but then more layers have been added on. So it's something now that I'm going to try to get to. Every year, Lord willing, and depending on where it is and financial situation. But you know, it's changed, and so my perception of it has changed. As well.
I don't think you should. I don't think anybody. I mean, I don't want to tell other people what to do, but for me, I don't go there with the idea that I'm looking for a specific card, and I don't go there because that's where I want to go to buy my cards. It's what you're saying. It's the interaction, the experience, seeing all your collecting friends, hanging out, you know, all the other things that go on, these side parties. That's absolutely the best part of the National. And if I came home with not a single card, it would be just as fun for me.
Yep. Isn't that crazy? Now, if you said that 20 years ago, that would be ludicrous. Like, I went to a card show and I didn't get anything, and I had a blast. Right? That wasn't really,
right. Yeah.
That really wasn't possible 20 years ago.
Well, it doesn't.
But now
it might sound like I'm crazy, but that's the truth.
Not to
and
me.
I think anybody that goes there, most people that go there, will tell you that, because you're not always going to get the best deals at the National, and you're not always going to find, like I just said, the cards that I'm searching for at the National. And, you know, if you want a 1958 Mickey Mantle, there's 3,000 of them. But and then you have like the really super expensive cards that they bring either to auction or, you know, get a lot of hype around that, you know, usually don't move, quite honestly. Not the auction ones, but, you know, you'll see some of those crazy ones at the dealers' tables, like the 1906 Ty Cobb postcard or something that just seemed to stay there all week. But it's definitely about the whole experience, just being surrounded. But, you know, I opened my videos, my YouTube videos with, I like to look at some baseball cards, right?
Yeah.
And so the first National I went to in Atlantic City, it was like the third day, and I still hadn't seen every table, and I was exhausted.
It's crazy.
Like, it's overwhelming how many tables. So I looked at my friends and I said, if you tell anybody I said this, I'm going to deny it. But I am actually tired of looking at baseball cards. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, it's great. Well, it's funny. You know, obviously now with technology, you know, our phones count steps. If you wear a smartwatch, it counts steps, and you don't realize it. But like last year, I did 45 miles of steps in the course of the 4 or 5 days of the show. That's crazy, and you don't realize it. I mean, you're right. Your feet hurt. You're tired. You get back home from the trip, and you need like another day or two just to like recover. But yeah, it's it's like it's like a hobby marathon. It's like running a hobby marathon. You need a couple days. Not that I'm a marathon runner. I think anyone that's watching me now is like, John, you don't run marathons, and you're exactly right. I don't run marathons, but I'm using that analogy because you're right. You do a lot of walking, you do a lot of talking, and you're just sort of you're spent when you get back home. Whether you drove or even if you're flying, it's just it gets to you. You do it every year, but you need that day or two or more, depending on who you are, to like kind of just like decompress and then replenish and get your energy back.
Time for a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Hobby News Daily is your homepage of the hobby, providing original writing, exclusive gem rate data, a daily morning minute podcast, and some of the best content creators in the hobby. Remember, hobbynewsdaily.com and at Hobby News Daily on social. Happy collecting!
We are back.
That first national is really special. And I could say, having gone to Disney World when I was little, going to my first national as an adult was more exciting. I was more in awe than going to Disney World as a child. I mean, if you are a collector, there's just nothing like it. Your first one anyway. Then you get used to what's going on, and just like with anything.
It's funny you say that, John. And I went to Disney World for my first time in 1983. I was 11 years old, and I'm going to be honest with you. I remember a little bit, but I don't remember a ton. But I can tell you a lot of stuff about each national. Right? I think when your memory capacity is shorter, your attention span is a little shorter. And as an adult, obviously, that's a different story. And so I think you appreciate it more, as an adult. Even like my son's 23 now, and I remember my wife saying like, "Hey, when do you think's a good time we could go to Disney World with Jordan?" I'm like, I don't think we should take him when he's too young. He won't even remember it. It would be, So we waited.
I've always said that. It's like they get scared, and they're scared to death when those big characters come at them, and they're in a stroller. And they start screaming, and it's like they're not going to remember this. And you just spent $5,000 on this vacation,
exactly.
And they're not going to have a single memory.
Yeah,
and it's August, and it's 100 degrees, and you're sweating. To me, Disney World is kind of torturesome. Yeah,
it's funny, and we waited till I think he was like 11 or 12. We waited till he was older, and he could appreciate it a little bit more and remember. And if I asked him today, I haven't talked to him about it, but if I asked him today, hey, what do you remember from going to Disney World? 12 years ago. Obviously, he'd remember some stuff, but he probably wouldn't remember as much as you think. And it's just human nature, how the mind works, and I think we appreciate stuff too when we're older, John. And I don't want to be morbid, but when we get older, we realize we're on the other side of that hill. And I think I can speak for myself anyway. We appreciate, when I go to the National, I say, hey, now how many more of these will I get to go to? You just don't know, right? And So I think you appreciate the moment when you look at it like that. And
your perspective definitely changes as you get older.
Yeah.
The thing is that youth is wasted on the young.
Yep.
Because when you get older, you just have so much more knowledge. You're more intelligent. You have more knowledge. You have more experiences. And there's kind of a phenomenon in the hobby now where it's like the younger people are talking down to us old collectors. Like, you're an old man. Stay off my lawn. You don't know what you're talking about. Times have changed. But, times don't really change. They really don't, because, things. I think it was Mark Twain who said, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it always rhymes. And we've been through a lot of things. I'm a stock investor. So I've been through two major collapses of the stock market, right? And I
Yeah.
had to trade through that. These people, if you're young, you don't know anything but bull market. That's all you know. You could be a complete moron and pick stocks and make money. And until you've laid in bed at night and wanting to cry because your portfolio is down so much in a single day, you're not a trader yet.
Yeah.
You haven't been through the trenches. And we've been through these things in cards the same way.
Yep.
And
Yep.
a couple of years ago, you could buy any card and make money the next day on it. You didn't have to be smart. All you had to do was take action. And when things went bad and, all of a sudden it wasn't so easy to flip that card or make that money, you see a lot of channels going away. You see not so much enthusiasm. You see all these people coming out and saying there's markets crashing and,
the hobby's dying.
Overreaction.
Which we both know is so far from the truth. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's
far from the truth. The only thing is there's less people maybe flipping and less action, right?
Well,
and when there's less action,
like you said, the easy dollar's not there, and those people don't want to. They don't want to work. They don't want to put in the work and the due diligence, and so
because it was like just these huge swings. It's like investing in that tech stock that goes up $10 every day. That's not normal. And under normal circumstances, you're going to buy a stock, goes up slowly over time. But nowadays everything was like that. So the cards were acting the same way, like these high flying tech stocks, like Bitcoin. And so you really couldn't go wrong. And when they come back, but nobody was used to them possibly going down and staying down for a while. And everybody's freaking out because they've never, it goes back to my analogy with stock. They never lived through that. They never went to bed practically wanting to cry from that trading day. It's just a different world. But, I was always taught to respect my elders. And when I was young and in business and first starting out, I wanted to have something as I grew older. And I had the good fortune. I had a lot of older Italian businessmen who kind of mentored me. They, and I'm to that point now. When you get to be around my age, you want to help people, you want to mentor people, and they would mentor me. And I was early 20s, and I soaked up everything they told me. I wanted to listen to everything they said. I never once said, "You're wrong, you're old, you're stupid. Things are changed." I never said that. I don't think that when I listen to Warren Buffett. So I don't know, like there's a lot of respect has gone out the window these days. But we live, a very confrontational world.
I'd argue
especially
with
on social media.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail right on the head, John. I agree with everything you said. It's a different era. I've heard people call it the participation trophy era, where everybody used to wins and no one loses. And so when adversity happens, right, they don't know how to deal with it. Where me and you, we've been through the ups and downs. Like, we don't like the downs, but we've been there before. Like, it sucks, but the sun's going to come out tomorrow or the next day.
Growing up the way we did, you had to build a mental toughness, right? A mental toughness. And, it's not their fault. I mean, that people were giving them trophies for coming in ninth place. And they have their own set of problems that you and I didn't have. We didn't have online bullying. We didn't have school shootings. We didn't have a lot of this craziness that goes on today. So I feel for them. I don't judge them for that. It's not their fault the way they were raised and the world they were raised in. It's tough. And
that's a good point.
Somebody once told me, a wise man, one of my mentors once told me, he's like, you hear the saying, "When I was your age," and he's like, that doesn't exist because you were never 16 when I was 16. Like I wasn't 16 when these kids were 16 and going through what they went through. So there's always going to be that difference. Yeah,
you can only, it's a great point. You can only say that when you're talking to someone of the same age or pretty close, pretty close to it. It's a great point. But it's funny when you're younger, even me, I'll speak for myself here, John, when you're younger, at least in my case, I think you were better than me because I kind of did think, I don't want to say I thought I knew it all, but I thought I knew more than I actually did. And it took years later to that light bulb to come on and say, man, was I wrong when I was younger? And now
you realize you didn't know jack back then, but it only experience teaches you that. But there's a saying, when I was 16, I couldn't believe how dumb my parents were. When I was 30, I couldn't believe how much they learned.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. All those sayings, we see them as like on wood plaques, and we're like, whatever. But there's truth. They exist because there's truth. There's truth in them, and it's funny. It's the old adage, right? If I knew then what I know now, we'd be so much even more better off.
Yeah,
so.
my favorite quote is from Nietzsche when he said
Yeah.
essentially that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, that's basically the way we grew up. I mean, you just dealt with stuff.
Yeah.
And like you said, the younger people, I don't know, they seem to freak out pretty easily. They can't cope with things because they had it in their own way, really. But they always get a pass. Like, let me tell you something. I got beat in school. They don't get beat in school. And if I said the shit that they say online to somebody, I would have got my ass kicked. There's no repercussions for being an idiot anymore on social media. You can say whatever you want, but in our day, you had to say that to somebody's face.
Yeah. Now it's funny you mentioned that. I just had a conversation with a student of mine because I grew up too with the teachers. I got hit on my wrist, the knuckles. I even had a teacher many moons ago, with the pointy stick that you touch to like an atlas or the chalkboard. Not super hard, but, hit me in the head because I was kind of telling jokes and disrupting the class. You do that now, and like you're going to be escorted out of the building as a teacher.
Here's the difference. You do that now, you get sued or arrested.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my father told me, you get beat in school, you're getting it again when you get home. And if you go to jail, I ain't bailing you out. So think twice.
It's a different. Yeah, it's a different time. And going back to where I kind of went off on a tangent.
I got paddled twice total. But the first time I got paddled in school, I was scared to death that my dad was going to find out. I didn't come running home and tell him. There was no way I was going to do that. I hit it
because you got one paddling. That was good enough. I don't want to second the belt.
The difference back then is you were guilty until found innocent.
Yeah,
your parents.
Yeah. And I was telling one of my students, I went to school in an era where teachers could hit you, and they could not understand that. They were like shot. Their jaw hit the floor.
Well, now the students hit the teachers.
Yeah. Sometimes, every once in a while. So, but all right, let's bring it back to card. You were just on the Card Life, a great episode. You got to show off some of your collection. Kind of talk about that experience, how it all went down, how it happened.
Well, that was just a phenomenal experience. He reached out to me and said he was doing. I'm in South Carolina. He said he was doing a South Carolina episode, and he was going to a guy who takes old. I'll put it in quotes because I don't like this term, junk wax cards. He cuts them up and makes mosaic pictures of famous baseball cards, popular baseball cards.
Tim Carroll. Was it Tim Carroll? It was Tim Carroll.
Yeah, that's it. And so he got a piece hanging in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So they went there and they were going to Shoeless Joe Jackson's house because he's from South Carolina. Yeah. And so they wanted to come and come here and see my collection and interview me. So he came in with the camera, and man, he was joking with my wife. He's like, normally I have to prod people, but I could barely keep up with him because I was like, come here and see this. Come here and see this. I take out a box. Hey, you got to see this. Here, set up. I want to talk about this. And I went on and on and on. And it's funny because he was filmed for like 2 hours, and it ended up being he showed 5 minutes, of what I did.
Yeah.
It was awesome. They did a great job. It was so much fun to be a part of. But I was just a little disappointed because I showed so much cool stuff that didn't get on there. Like he could have done a whole half hour on what I showed.
It's funny you said that.
Stories to go with them. And they
you're a historian. You're a historian
for those stories.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I'm a big fan of put it on different episodes. Chop it up and just air it at different. It's funny hearing you say that because a couple years ago when the COVID crescendo hit with the hobby, Utica News contacted me. I'm in Syracuse, and Utica's about 20 miles away. They knew about my podcast, and they're like, John, can we come over and do some filming, talk to you about what's going on in the hobby, show off some of your stuff. And like you just said, they came over. It was probably 3 hours of filming, and then they ran the segment. It was 3 or 4 minutes long in the newscast. And so hearing you say that, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I have such a passion, for the hobby, for the cards, for the sports, for the players, and the history. And so, I tried to keep it as brief as possible, but I'd tell a good story about some rare card and some obscure player. That's really, a great story, I think. So I try. That's what I share on my YouTube channel. And so I was a little disappointed, but it was still fantastic, and they did a great job with it.
Yeah, and in their defense, you know what I mean? They only have so much time. And,
absolutely.
I would almost rather see, though, John, rather than do that episode where, like, it's 3 different stories, do 3 different episodes where, like, you're one episode, Tim Carroll's an episode. You know what I mean? That way you get more of each person and each topic, each story. And
even if they only did 2, I would have probably got nothing in. That's an extra 5 minutes, which is long on a TV show. And of course, they had other things. They opened packs and all that. And Matt Strom, is the host. He's a pitcher, so he opens packs, and they do other things as well. But they do a really great job with that show.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of, and I know you'll remember the show. Remember This Week in Baseball?
Oh man, I watched it. Yeah, absolutely.
Mel Allen.
I missed that show so much.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, but on the hobby side of things. It sort of has that. It sort of has that sort of feel to it, And it's funny because they. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and they played the card life at stadiums before games. As well, which So
I didn't know that.
It's fun because that's what they used to do with This Week in Baseball too. So because I remember going to I don't know if it was a Yankee or a Mets game, and we were there early enough, and they were running This Week in Baseball on the Jumbotron, and I thought it was just on TV. I would watch it at home, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, they're playing it in the stadium too. This is cool. That's what they do with the card life. So that's
interesting.
And the way they segment it up, it just has it brings me back to This Week in Baseball, just the hobby obviously the hobby version of it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you did get to show some a small part of your collection. It's obviously a very large collection. You mentioned you kind of go to the National, not so much with a list, but just kind of open-minded. Do you have one card that's on the top of your list that you have yet to acquire? Would that be fair to say, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I have several.
Yeah,
and it's like I kick myself because before the boom, these were all so easily attainable, and I took them for granted that anytime I wanted to, pay that money, I could go get them, and now they're 10 times higher. And they're at amounts I don't want to pay, right?
Yeah.
So I think for many of us collectors, we're kicking ourselves when they were just the same price for a decade or longer, and you just always assumed you could get those things. And I think for people that are just collectors, I think that's one of the reasons that they had a problem when people were treating cards like stocks, is because it drove. On one hand, it makes your cards worth more that you already have. But if you're like me and you're not selling them, what good does that do you, right? Because on the negative, it drove card prices up to the point that cards I could get, I can't get now. So it was a kind of a catch-22 there, good and bad.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm a Jackie Robinson guy, and for much like what you said, John, is for many years, I'm like, I'll get the 48 leaf, whenever. It'll be there. I even had 3 opportunities where someone actually offered it to me, and I just didn't pull the trigger. And it's just like, I'll get it next month or next year. And I procrastinated on it. And exactly what you said. The crescendo happened. I do have it now. But it definitely cost me more money than the many times before when I kind of kicked the can down the road, and there's no one else's fault but my own. I'm not pointing. That was, my fault for just kind of assuming that it would always be that way. When we all know that's not how the hobby.
Yeah, the
always
thing
works,
is when
right?
it's that way for 15 years, you're not expecting that sudden of a change,
That's
So it
it's
is
true.
I mean, it's our fault. Don't get me wrong. And
Yeah,
then what happened during the boom is I had to adjust what I was willing to pay for things because
yeah,
I was always a bit of a bargain shopper and find those rare gems under the radar and stuff.
yeah.
And so I had to be willing to pay a little bit more if I wanted any of these cards. So that was interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it's crazy, and but now things have settled back down again, and stuff has some. It's funny stuff now is definitely stuff that was sort of out of the budget during that crescendo has kind of come back in budget too. So
Yeah,
people who complain about the market, like you can buy stuff cheaper now than you could have, a year and a half ago. So I look at that as someone who likes to buy cards. I look at that as a positive. I guess as a dealer, it's a different story, but that's been like that forever. Like this is not new terrain. You know what I mean? So
yeah, the thing is there are so many new collectors that they are where I was, 30 years ago. And so really the only cards they know are the real big iconic cards that are shown over and over and over on every auction house and every magazine. And there's just these certain 100 cards or so that are just iconic. And those are the cards that everybody wants. And so I have, I believe I have the most extensive collection in the world. I have every era, every sport, you name it. And I have an enormous, it's enormous. So I seek out a lot of the more obscure players, a lot of the more obscure sets. And these are people that, new collectors who are more into the cards and don't know the history of the games, never heard of, sets they don't know exist. And so those cards are now selling, back to 2014 pricing because they're not being chased by the masses like the 49 Leaf Jackie Robinson or the 56 Mickey Mantle, those kinds of cards, right? So I still buy tons of cards and spend very little money. I am happy about that. But, Jackie Robinson, nobody blew up as much as Jackie Robinson cards.
Yeah.
And his cards were never, they were always a little pricey, but they were never like they ended up becoming, right? Like they never sold for the same prices as Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and those guys, and now they do. That's a lot of his cards have gotten totally out of reach if you're looking for, that Leaf is really shot up, and the 48 Sport Thrills. My God, that thing was he didn't have to pay very much for that at all back in the day. Now it's worth a fortune. So times have changed.
Crazy. Yeah, and listen, I even sold a couple of my Jackies just because of the levels they shot up to. I'm like, I don't I like this card a lot, but I don't love it. Like I can let it go and then buy something I really love, and so you have to those sort of decisions, you know what I mean, where you're like, hey, I want to obtain this card. It'd be easier, if I sell this card. Obviously, I bought it before this kind of increase hit, and so it kind of makes sense to do that. It doesn't mean I love Jackie any less. It's just
Right.
I'd rather have this card over this card. I paid very little for this card, but this is what it's doing now. Like it makes sense to do it. And
well, that's a struggle I think that a lot of collectors had during the boom. Let's say that you had I don't know, like the 52 Mantle, and at the current time your finances aren't that good. Maybe you're not making that much, but you shelled out several $1,000s for that 10 years or 20 years ago, and you're seeing those things sell for, I don't know, like a 4 for 80 grand or something. And that might be life-changing money to you. So no matter how much you love that card, if you need the money, man, it's hard to pass that up, especially when you don't know it's going to stay there. I mean, it probably will. It's always gone up throughout time, but that doesn't mean that can't change. Just like our cards stayed the same prices for 15 years, but that changed overnight. And,
Yep.
that could come down overnight. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, that's if you can change your life or put your kid through college, no matter how much you love the card, you might sell that thing.
Yeah. Well, I thought I was gonna put my future kids through college with Greg Jeffries rookies. That didn't work out. That didn't work out. So, well,
Joe
John, man,
Charbonneau.
this was.
I'm old enough to remember Joe Charbonneau.
I remember I remember him too.
1981 tops. Everybody was chasing that card.
Yeah, no doubt. That's crazy, man. But
Yeah.
well, listen, man, this was a blast. We're gonna, as long as you come back, we'll do this again and cover even more ground. I look forward to seeing you here in about 4 or 5 months in Cleveland at the pre-mentioned national. But as always, John, I always give out where people can find your content, what you're doing, any socials you want to share. Put it out there for the masses.
Sure. I have a Facebook page and Instagram. Not the hugest fan of Instagram, but I'm on there. And my favorite is doing YouTube videos. And all of those are under the Mangini Collection, Mangini. And I do them for fun. My Facebook page, I have just about every big card I have on there and albums. You can look through my entire collection. I have them broken out into albums. And on YouTube, I just show cards. Mostly 90% of what I do is show cards. Mostly I like to show cards you haven't seen before. I like to talk about players you may not have heard of before. And it's really, like I said earlier, at my age and where I'm at in life, it's more about educating the hobby, especially newer people. If you're looking to learn about vintage baseball cards and stuff like that, old players, then I think you get something out of what I share.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll make one correction. Newer people and even older people. I've been doing this a long time, and I learned something every day, John. And I'm sure even watching your stuff
too. I still do too. But
even watching your stuff, I'm like, I didn't know that. Like so newer people maybe could learn more, but older people can learn stuff.
Well,
too.
there's no doubt, and I learn things every day from other YouTubers and reading things in magazines and wherever I get that information. I'm still learning something every week. But it is funny you bring that up, because I have collectors and they'll be like, I've been collecting for 30 years. I never saw that set before. I never knew that existed before. And I get so many people that are like, oh, I'm on eBay right now as they're commenting, looking for cards I show.
eBay should give you a commission.
Well, it's just fun. It's just fun because a lot of the cards I bought, I learned that way too. I saw them in a magazine or I saw somebody show it. I'm like, oh my God, I have to have that. And then I go shopping for it. So, that's part of that's the greatness of the community, is us sharing our knowledges, experiences, our knowledge, experiences. And, because when when we were young, you didn't have that. You had Beckett, which was a price guide, but it didn't really tell you anything about card sets and so forth. Then they came out with Baseball Card Magazine. And I remember the first time I walked into a newsstand and saw that thing, I was like, you got to be kidding me. They have a magazine for baseball cards? I had to buy it. And that changed the game, because that's when you started to be able to learn stuff. But then the other problem was you couldn't find the cards because there was no eBay. You had to go to the occasional flea market. So they were so hard to find. And you couldn't be picky about centering or corners, because that might be the only time you ever see that card, even if it's a more common card. They weren't just, there wasn't a smorgasbord. Like right now, you can go onto eBay or an auction house. Well, you could go buy whatever you want within minutes, probably, But it wasn't like that back then. Couldn't be as picky.
Yeah, the hobby is, I always say the hobby is bigger now, but smaller now with social media and the internet and all that stuff. And the more shows we have now. So
more accessible. Everything's more accessible to you.
Yep. You can't sleep. You wake up at 3 a.m. You just grab your smartphone and you can buy a card in 30 seconds after you wake up. You couldn't do that, obviously, back in the day. And it's just a different, I will say this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing is we grew up with 3 TV channels, right? And even now I have 130 and there's never anything on to watch. And there's rarely, you're never going to, you don't find baseball card shows. So you watch things like Pawn Stars or something and hope somebody brings in a card. So YouTube gives you 24-hour access to sports card content. I mean, it's unbelievably different from the way that we grew up.
Yeah, I will say this. I think you'll agree too, John, and we'll wrap up. I like the convenience we have now, but I'm also glad I grew up without it, because I think because of that, I appreciate both aspects. I appreciate the convenience now, but I also know what it was like to not have it and appreciate that. As well.
We're far more distracted today. Like, you're always talking to your family, staring at your phone, or it gets a little addicting too, and you have to be careful. And if you have a channel, then you want to comment and read the comments and comment back to people who are commenting. So you have all this interaction. And then, because I'm seen on there and known, for my vintage collection, a lot of I get constant messages asking me if a card's real, or asking me about a set, or sending me a picture and saying, have you ever seen this before? Or can you tell me anything about it? And, I respond to all those. I encourage people to do that. But it does, it's very time consuming. Yeah,
no doubt. Well, listen, you do a great job. Like you said, your passion is evident in watching your content. You educate people. You're learning, like you said, as well as the rest of us. And you don't need me to tell you that, but keep on keeping on, and we'll as long as you come back, we'll have you back on, and we'll do some more.
All right, I appreciate it.
All right, Johnny, take care.
You too.
All right, thanks to John Mangini for joining us. He's got an incredible collection, and just on the Card Life show, as we talked about on during the interview, but just a great personality, a character in a positive way, right? We talk about ambassadors and advocates. That guy's having fun, right? That's what the hobby is all about. Got a great collection to boot, and got a good attitude as well. So we'll have him back for sure, as long as he'll come back, and appreciate him coming on. We're going to get to our Hobby is the People announcer of the week, some closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up the show.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
This is Zach Byrne, one of many hobbyists who returned during COVID. Thanks to John for steering me in the right direction. And remember, the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
That's a wrap for this week. Huge thanks to you, the listeners out there, because without you, there is no us. If you like the show, we truly appreciate positive reviews. Big ups to our great guests who drive the show and our awesome sponsors who make it all possible. Sports Card Nation will be back next week, but don't forget to catch either Hobby Quick Hits or Card Mentions coming up on Monday. I'll leave you with this. How do we change the world? One random act of kindness at a time. Remember, the hobby is the people.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group, or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.